this is Frantz Kantor here again, cartoonist, illustrator, toon talker, teacher, blabbermouth, you name it. I've got I'm doing another caricature today, and I just wanted to say that I've been looking forward to this. I've been thinking about this for a couple of days. This guy that I'm doing is pretty much you could call him like the most important figure, I guess, in the field of comic books. And unfortunately, I never got to meet him, but he's one of a kind, and I really I've got some little tidbits to tell. Not very much. I haven't met him, as I said, but somebody very important in the comic book business, comic book world. There's a little rough thumbnail which I've actually taken the trouble to sketch up a little bit in more detail. And let's get on with this. I'll give you a little hint as to who this is. This is does the word Excelsior mean anything to you? Or how about Nuff Said? No? Or how about True Believers? Do you know who it is now? Okay. It's actually this guy here, who you can see in uniform, and he's drawing something. I don't know what he's drawing, but you could see that he's left-handed, so unless I'm pretty much mistaken, unless the picture's flipped, but I can't see any evidence of that. So there he is drawing, and here he is again. I've just covered his name up a little bit. You may have just glimpsed it. There he is without pre-mustache and the sunglasses that he wore in the later years. So this is the man. This is Stan Lee. And Stan Lee is a very controversial figure. Of course, you can regard him as the father of comic books in a way that comic books existed before, but he really put a force, an effort into the comic book industry, and where comic books were just sort of regarded as an unusual pastime. They weren't that mainstream at all. He kind of created an empire, which is the Marvel Comics empire, which is now owned by Disney. This is him towards the end of his life. You could probably remember him popping up in various Marvel comics. I'm actually going to use this photograph here to work from, though, because I think there's a lot of lines in here which we can explore as geographers, like trying to map map terrain, sort of work out meaning. What does these lines mean? Let's find out. We'll investigate as we go. So I've just, as I said, using just a quick thumbnail to grab some shapes which I think we can play with. I'm going to explore the angles and things, the proportions. With caricature, of course, you're basically changing the rules as you go. You're investigating broad shapes, very simplified shapes. And within those simplified shapes, which you're then able, because of their simple nature, you're able to expand things, make things bigger or smaller. So within that, we're going to start to build up the story. Okay, so this is the overarching shapes, the book covers, right? And we're going to be building up the character and the narrative inside. So thinking about caricatures, what you pick on things that are relevant in terms of their size or their importance in the story of the face. There's a lot of nice angles and things which I quite like here that I can play with. I don't think I'm overdoing the sharpness or the effect of the angles. I'm just playing with it. It's just sort of a fun exercise. If I can get a likeness out of this process, then great. Then if not, it doesn't matter. I'm still learning as I go. This is like a happy tree or happy cloud, Go back to Bob Ross. So areas to concentrate on with this is kind of a peanut shape or a kidney shape. It's quite big at the top and has a broad forehead which we can play with. Thinking of this in terms of light and shade, of course, your light source is coming down from the top left and creating generally a shadow area over on the right, which you can break up with a reflected light, or in this case would be a rim light or fill, or both, which they've actually created to give more dimension to the face in the photograph. That's what we're going to look for in terms of the overall three-dimensional form of this shape. So it's a simplified shape, rendered three-dimensional. We're using tone paper, which is going to meet us about halfway, 50% of the way, and we're using three colored pencils, using a brown, which in this case I think is a sienna or terracotta. There's a white pencil and a soft white pencil, which is a Prismacolor. These two are Prismacolors, and we're using also a harder Faber-Castell Polychromo for the details. So we're drawing both the form and the shadow and the light. Okay, that's what we're trying to achieve here. We're also going to concentrate on this what I call the T-zone area. I'll use a different thing here. So the T-zone is the relationships between the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. So they form this sort of mask area, the features of the face. They're the areas that we're going to concentrate on. So the relationships between each of these elements in the T-zone are very important to establish the likeness. Okay, so, brown pencil, we're able to work light and loose. Let's try to keep that as I like to simplify, but I also like to give myself the ability to put in, details where relevant, that will help with the likeness, but it just gives all of these lines a little bit more character, I think. All right. So what am I focusing on here is the perspective, the alignment of the eyes on a head that's three-quarter, that's turned around. So there is a little bit of perspective happening, which I want to allude to in the alignment of these of the eyes, of the elements of this illustration. Okay, so obviously there's some elements that are going to be hidden because of the way I've accentuated the size of the nose, for example. And I'm conforming everything within the shape that I originally designated. Okay, so don't work too dark yet. Just work very lightly so that if you need to, you can use the eraser and not start again, but, work back a little bit. There's no undo button on this on this process. This is all live, scary, reality. Some beautiful lines in Stan Lee's face, beautiful wrinkles that reflect a lot of the thought, certainly a lot of the enthusiasm, a lot of the patience and enthusiasm that he's had. As I said to you before, he's a very controversial character because many people think that he's kind of taken this stage or the spotlight away from people like Jack Kirby, and in many ways that was always going to happen when you have a character that is trying to single-handedly build the business of, in this case, Marvel Comics, but really what he's doing is making comics more relevant, right? So his Barnum Bailey type of approach to comics and heroes, superheroes and things, actually many people didn't like, but it actually worked really, really well. And I'm thinking about me as a little 7 or 8 year old first reading Spider-Man and then reading the letters page which he took over and as the editor, and was speaking in his own, over-the-top manner to kids, to readers, fans, the greater unwashed, me. So it was very, very important growing up to have that person always there, It was refreshing. At first it was kind of like, what the hell's this? I've never seen anyone like this write, so promotionally, like a promoter, full-on promoter in the comic book industry. It was not the normal thing to do. So he really made that a force. He made Marvel a force to reckon with, and really, as editor, he gave Jack Kirby a license to be Jack Kirby. So if you look at Jack Kirby's early work, when he really exploded, he started doing these covers. And those covers really leapt off the shelves because you never had this three-dimensional, dramatic, action-packed covers on a comic before, even a superhero comic. They just didn't exist. They weren't like that. They were part of the comic narrative that existed in the pages themselves. They weren't this sort of staged, over-dramatic, exciting compositions that Kirby was able to produce. And, really, Stan Lee was the vehicle for this, and he could. Sure, he benefited from it in the end, but he really promoted it. He was the promoter. So, the artists were great. They had great artists there, but they were fully supported by or at least from the sidelines, from where I was standing, it looked like it was a very amicable experience for the artists. You know, obviously there's a question of authorship and ownership and things that became a sore point as the business became more and more successful, of course. You know, there's that issue of copyright and copyrights, belonging to the individual that are almost ignored by the corporation. And, you know, it wasn't always a corporation. I think that's how it happened, that they got ownership of the original art, for example. I don't think he ever thought that he wouldn't be able to get it back. I just thought he just, you know, happy to do the work and to explore his own artistic storytelling. So, there's a lot of subtlety in his lines that are throwing me off a little bit with the likeness. I hope that I'll be able to recapture some of these lines, the more details that I put in. I think I'm getting a little bit too much reflection on this. I might just prop that up a little bit. Yeah, it's a little bit better. I can see more now. So he had these toned sunglasses most of his adult life, and I'm not sure why, but you know, that was like his trademark, I guess. So it became a thing. So you have to deal with the fact that you're going to obscure a lot of this detail you're putting in with the glasses. So you've got to draw underneath, was what I'm saying. You've got to draw through the glass. So Alice has to be drawn through the looking glass. I'm just taking my time to build up this the details, but I'm structured now with the shapes that I've simplified, that I've actually used as my continent. So that what I'm doing now is drawing in the rivers and the mountains and valleys and things. So when I was a kid growing up, I asked my parents for a Superman comic because I was sick. I was at home, sick, quarantined like I am today. Not sick or quarantined, but we're in, lockdown. But the comics, they were all out of Superman. They were all out of Batman. I did manage to get a Green Lantern, which I enjoyed, but I couldn't get any Superman or Batman. But they did get me a Spider-Man, and I remember my father said, the guy in the comic shop said this is, in the newsagent said this is really good. You'll enjoy this. And of course I did, and I never looked back. I can even tell you the issue. It was Spider-Man versus the Rhino. So it was full-on action, and the dialogue was amazing. At one point, I can't remember if it was Spider-Man or Rhino. It's probably Spider-Man threatening the Rhino, or threatening the Rhino back with a funny threat. I'm going to knock you into next week. It's like not I'm going to knock you unconscious, but I'm going to knock you so unconscious you'll be unconscious till next week. I just found the language to be so rich and characteristic, full of character, and full of character and energy. So he was a very exciting man, a very exciting writer, a very exciting publisher. Any way you like to throw this, you cannot deny that. I don't think there would be a comic industry today. Certainly wouldn't be these big blockbusters that Disney bank on. There wouldn't be a comic industry without him, because DC could not compete. They just could not compete, and it benefited them in terms of expanding the interest in comic books. They were able to offer alternative. Here's an alternative, Batman, Superman, all of these other titles, which I would occasionally purchase. I would buy them like everybody else. We didn't just got Marvel. We got other titles as well. But Marvel was our first love, Marvel Comics. So I was actually quite spoiled in growing up. I remember each of the newsagents had different Marvel titles, so I'd take my sausage dog and walk 20 kilometres or something all around the eastern suburbs of Sydney and pick up every single Marvel title. Yep, I was that spoiled. So it was something I can still feel tingly when I think about it today, finding Tales to Astonish and seeing the incredible Spider-Man work by, I can't even remember his name now, the artist, and Doctor Strange, which was that was a comic, wasn't it? Master of the Occult. You like little 7-year-old picking up a comic about Master of the Occult. So I don't know how that worked, but it was a very interesting experience, a very interesting time, and some I just really enjoyed them. I really enjoyed the stories, the narratives that come out, and the characters. Peter Parker, the Thing. Reed Richards and the Thing, and didn't really like Johnny Storm much. Captain America, of course, very. Captain America started out life in, was it Mercury Comics or something, or whatever Marvel used to be, and it was very one-dimensional. So Kirby offered this visual ballet to the fight scenes that just leapt off the page, and in particular his covers sold the issues without doubt, I think, because no one had really done that before. That sort of forced perspective, really added to the dramatic element of the action, made it really come alive. So you have to look at who allowed this deviation from the normal comic book style and look and feel, and it would have been him. So however you feel about his stewardship of of Marvel or the comic book industry in general. I don't think you can really look past his incredible enthusiasm, salesmanship in this business. It's really it's a very exciting business. As you can see now, it's a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. These stories, and they existed because of this man here recognized that it was an exciting business. It was something to sink your teeth into, and he did that. So you have to sort of look at that aspect, I guess. All right, so just going to put in some highlights here. So when I was a kid, I started collecting these comics. I was really excited. I had a neighbor who worked for Qantas and did a shift, I think, for Pan Am once, or he did a New York flight or route. And I remember he asked me when I was a kid, "Is there anything in New York that you want me to get you?" And of course I said, "Yeah." I gave him a comic book, and I said, "Can you go to New York and get me a T-shirt, the Avengers T-shirt?" So he went to wherever it was, Manhattan, and to the Marvel offices, and told the concierge downstairs he wanted a T-shirt for this little boy in Sydney, Australia, and gave him the money for the T-shirt. It was like a coupon in the back of the comic, So they had them in stock apparently, and the concierge said, "Well, wait here," and he went upstairs and put the order in, and 10 minutes later a little guy with a mustache walked down to the lobby and handed over a T-shirt to my friend, my neighbor, and the T-shirt was signed by this little guy with a mustache, and his name was Stan Lee. So I had an autographed T-shirt of the Avengers, hand signed and delivered by the publisher of Marvel Comics. And I know what you're thinking. Do I have that T-shirt now? No, I don't have that T-shirt. I wore it until the writing faded, and then eventually the screen print faded. So it was no longer, and of course I was 7 or 8, so I grew out of the size anyway. And it would just have, disappeared. I never thought of saving things. I should have, because it was very special to me. It was very highly prized. And I was very impressed, that Stan Lee himself, the guy that signed off in the letters page, actually not only signed the T-shirt but hand delivered it to my friend. It would have been great to get a photograph of that experience, but just the thought of it, really, it meant a lot to me. It personalized. I mean, Marvel Comics it was a very personalized business growing up, reading the letters and the adventures, and the way that they were not just drawn, but the way that they were promoted was really exciting and personal. It meant something to you. It's sort of like speaking your language, you know, the language of an 8-year-old at the time, like speaking directly to them, and you know, it makes them care about the comic. It was your comic. It was personal. This is your comic. So, yeah, he's a controversial character, but I don't think you could ever argue that that he loved what he was doing. He did love what he's doing. Of course he loved it. It's not about the money, it's about the medium itself. So, I don't know what your thoughts are. I don't actually have, someone asked me, what was your favorite comic? And, certainly Captain America or X-Men or something. Fantastic Four probably was up there too, but I never really had favorites because I had them all. I just had them all. I managed to get every single one. Every single week I'd go out. It would take me a day, maybe sometimes 2 days, because they'd deliver it, Wednesdays or Thursdays or Tuesdays or something like that in the different stores. And each store had different titles. Some had, Tales to Astonish. Some had Captain America, Iron Man, Spider-Man, so Daredevil. So you had to sort of take your chances to make sure, and pray that no one else got there first. So it was a good experience growing up. It was exciting. I don't know what my dachshund thought about it. I'm sure, she was very excited about the walk, but it was a long walk for a little dachshund, for tiny little legs. Long walk. And that was the experience that I had, like hunting down every week. And sometimes I'd take time off school because of comic book day I had to go and hunt down the Hulk. So I liked the TV show, of course. That obviously the limited animation that they did for that, it kind of meant a lot at the time, because you were in the world of comics and in the world of cartoons. So both at the same time, I learned how to read by reading comics, not Marvel comics, of course, as I was older then, but I was reading Disney comics, Look and Learn, things like that when I was little. And I could appreciate the difference in spelling, for example, between American English and, English. As did a lot of people, just because you're so enveloped in American culture and English culture at the same time. You've got this dual citizenship role, perhaps, or three citizenship role. You're American, you're Australian, and you're English, so you get involved in the culture of all three countries, which is interesting. It's reflected in our TV. You know, we had Australian shows and we had American shows and we had English shows, probably in equal proportions. I don't think we're alone in that. I think they experience that in New Zealand and Canada as well. So they pretty much got that as a culture. So, what I'm doing here is I'm articulating these light and dark areas. I'm looking back and forth to the reference to the photograph of Stanley, trying to keep in context the shapes that I'm seeing there. You know, I am simplifying to some extent a lot of the contours and shapes that I'm seeing. So, yeah, it's a matter of taste, I guess, of your own particular opinion of how you want to strike a balance between the different elements that you're describing here, light and shade. I mean, obviously, I told you that the light comes, it's favoured up to the top left of the picture. So their shadows should be falling down on this side of the face, the right side of the face. But there's also a fill light coming up from below. Okay, so these are just things that you think about as you go. You just sort of remember, before you commit to something. I guess you sort of think about, well, what does this line mean? Or what if I shade here? What's that saying about the direction of the light? Or the relevance of how light or dark to make something. So, I used a Posca, which is a paint marker, which is opaque. Okay, just to kick up the pencil a little bit, because the white pencil just can't really tackle really contrasty whites. And it's going to help with things like the white of the eyebrows, and some of the wrinkles need sharper delineation, of course, which is kind of cool. We're looking for a three-dimensional drawing of the face. That's what we're trying to achieve. So, we're looking at things to make it pop. And if that helps it to pop, then great. There's a lot of shading under his eyes, around his eyes. It's a little bit difficult to see the exact structure, but I'm trying to match left and right in terms of the anatomy of the eyes, even with the heavy wrinkles and folds of skin. There is a basic structure which I have to adhere to, at least think about when I'm working. Okay, because all of these are indicators of anatomy and also thinking about perspective and how things tend to line up. There's a lot of reference to, again, the sunglasses are quite pronounced dark. So I think that's going to be also an indicator of how this is going to feature. These highlights in here are going to feature. So I might go over the white with a darker tone, is what I'm saying. So just building form, thinking of these wrinkles as mountains in a way, like I'm creating a map that makes sense, that can get me home. I just want to go home. We're just exploring the face here, these lines, what do they actually mean? It's a very intelligent expression he has. It's a lot of inquiry. So inquiry as in I wonder how this would go, or wonder how this would work, or wonder about this, or wonder about that. It looks like he's got so many ideas that it's just showing up in his face. Let's try and there's some, I can't help, I can't get all of these, the correct number of these. They're sort of compound. A lot of these crisscross as well, these creases and folds here. But there is a inquisitive raising of his left brow, I think, which prospectively may not be obvious immediately from the position of the hairs of the brow, but it's definitely happening in the wrinkles, the furrows. Right, so Stan Lee passed away, I think it must be a year ago now, and as I said, he had a very profound effect on the comic book industry and of course on me. I really enjoyed his writing and his ideas. So I'm trying to capture some of the contours, that distinctive directions of these wrinkles in his features. It's like geology, like the creation of the Grand Canyon with millions of years of water erosion over time. These shapes, or these furrows and creases and wrinkles around his face are created by thoughts and expressions that he strikes over the years, right? So if you're predominantly happy, you have generally lines that indicate that you've smiled a lot. If you're generally sad, then the opposite is true. So he is actually telling me a story here with his face. One of great caring, great. I don't know if I'm seeing sort of it's almost could be a humanitarian streak perhaps, which might be at odds with how people view his actions in the past. I don't know, but there is something about this. He's a communicator. He's a great communicator, and I think you can tell that from these lines. They are speaking that, they're saying that in volumes. So, okay, we're progressing. There's a lot of lines we have to capture. There's also, I'm trying to sort of capture a little bit of the pin lighting effect. As you can see here, the side light, rim light, that you can use to light the sides of portraits, and this is what's happening with his face. Of course, the pencil lines are great for drawing mustaches and hair in general. They look like hairs, So they're actually helping the process a little bit. Remember, there's a reflected light that's coming back. From the right. This is a way of creating a dimensional drawing. But still, there's a bit of highlights on here. These are quite nice. The way that the fill light has picked up the corners of these creases themselves. There's a little bit of using light and shade to create volume. So these little folds have volume themselves. Okay. Okay, we can use the white pen for this stuff. This white hair, be kind of nice. There's also a lot of. It looks like he's got like a mullet happening here, which is kind of cool. So what I'm doing is I have to be careful with the amount of black that you put in here, because they're actually quite spidery, thin white hairs. Okay, where are we going with this? We don't know. I'm a little bit lost with this part of the mouth, but because I'm making things come forward, and some of those things start and join different places on the face. So in pulling things forward, elements forward, I'm actually changing the physiognomy of the features a little bit. I might come back into these lines with a black pen, black brush, just to sort of kick out those, thick and thin qualities of just the outlines, nothing else. Again, look at the shape of all these little lines and think about the directions that they're taking. Think about also the reflected lights that come in on the other direction. So it's kind of nice. Oh, we should put some more. Yeah, that kind of works. All right, so pushing on. I'm going to simplify a lot of this stuff here because it's getting further away from the face. I tend to stylize a little bit more, just to focus attention back into this area, right? Which, you remember what this area is called? Kind of looks like a T. Looks like a T. So that's where the features sit. Okay, here we go. Getting closer and closer and closer to something that's resolving itself in terms of its tonal qualities, representational qualities, not just of the likeness, but of the forms that they're describing itself. So you're drawing something that is more than just the likeness of the character. You're drawing something that is fun to do, and this is fun. I'm enjoying this. I hope you guys are enjoying this as well. I just look for things around these features that kind of would be fun to draw, you know. These beautiful folds of skin here, you know. The presence of shading, of shadows. Lost a little bit of the properties of the white shirt, so I'll just bring that back a little bit. There's a nice highlight there, which I'll pick up again with a pen. Yeah, that kind of works all right. And again, simplifying a little bit. There we go. So, pushing forward, getting some more highlights here and there. Good fun. There's a line of light around the bottom of the lip, which is the leading edge of this bevel, in a way, that's created. So, you know, it's fun drawing these faces that have folds like this. Very exciting to study them. And of course they have meaning, don't they? You can tell from this, all of the lines, look at all of the activity here. There's a lot of activity up here, a lot of lines in the forehead, which indicate thinking, right? So there's a lot of thinking there. There's nothing in the face that says there's an over propensity to frown. It doesn't exist. There's nothing in the face that says there's an over propensity to laugh. There's just a normal amount of laughing and a normal amount of crying and a normal amount of frowning and a normal amount of everything. So what is there is a lot of activity around the head, around the brows, that indicate thought. There's a lot of thinking. And a lot of lines around the mouth that indicate talking. So, you know, there's not a lot of lines there that seem to sit in a... they seem to indicate that the mouth is closed 99% of the time. This looks the opposite. Looks like this guy has been yakking a lot. That's what it looks like. And that's my argument. So, changed my mind. It'd be kind of nice to get like a magenta watercolor or paint over this area. I'm just doing this as a sketch. You know, if I was going to do this as a color illustration, of course it would be a totally different kettle of fish. So I've got a little bit of time to play here, so I just thought I'd put one of his one of his sayings. I'm just using the paper as a barrier so I don't pick up pigment. Kind of, it's a little bit crooked, the frame, but that's all right. Can live with that. I might fix that up later. What else? There he is. Okay, so what can we do now? Put a bit of, let's add a little bit of sparkle here and there. So just adding highlights here and there just to pick up the detail a little bit. Just keep an eye on where the details are going. Keep looking back at the reference themselves. Make sure that you don't overdo highlights unnecessarily, because it changes quite a lot of the relevance of the faces. I'm just going to help this line out a little bit here and over here. So make it a little bit more dramatic. Yeah, that kind of, what's going on here? It kind of works. Now it's flowing. Okay, so far so good. I think might go in with the black pen here, black brush. What I want to try to achieve here, I think, is some definite thick and thin contours here and there. Just enough to make a difference. So everyone has opinions on, what's their favourite. As I started to tell you before, I don't really have a favourite. I enjoyed them all because I managed to get every single one. I had quite a collection when I was, I think, 12. Came home one day and my mother thought she'd have a clean up and emptied all my stuff, my cache of TV Century 21s and all my Marvel comics, and it was a big shock to me. Obviously, it's an understatement. It was very sad. Very sad. Because I did a lot of trading as well, so a lot of I used DC comics to trade for Marvel comics. I know it's probably, that's sacrosanct. How dare you do that? Batman and Superman. But I was really more into Iron Man and X-Men and Captain America. I just couldn't help it. So, yeah, every single one. There were some great comics over the years there. Gene Colan, of course, did some of the best Daredevils. John Romita Sr. Really excelled at Spider-Man. I mean, can't remember his name now, for God's sake. The co-creator of Spider-Man. I've actually got a caricature of him. He only passed away, I think, last year. But he did Spider-Man but only in the the collected works, like the Strange Tales of something like that, which are like reprints of earlier comics. But he did do the spookiest Doctor Strange before Gene Colan took it over. And that Doctor Strange used to give me nightmares. As I said, it was, a little kid, and it's a tale about the occult, which is pretty scary, Dormammu. There you go. So this is the slow part of the exercise here. We're exploring, don't tell me you're going to dry out on me. So I'm just trying to push the ink down to the brush from, through the handle. That's why I'm shaking things up. There's a lot of that going on. I guess it's a trade-off. I could have used a dip pen for this. I don't want to use textures or thick markers because I'm not sure how this paper would handle it. I think it might go through. I know pretty well that this black ink, which is kind of like a weak Indian ink, won't go through pretty much, so I'm pretty safe in using it like this. This is the quietest I've been, I think, doing these caricatures, so I don't want you to think I've got nothing to say about him. We've got lots of stuff to say about him. I'm thinking about the drama of the drawing here and what I'm trying to get across. You know, when you do a caricature, you do any kind of portrait, whether it be caricature or not, there's always a chance that you won't get the likeness. So you won't get it. And I'm always of the belief that that's inevitable. That's just going to happen. It's just one of those things. Some faces don't immediately tell you their story. You know, others do. It's just one of those things. But you have to be a consummate investigator here. Your investigative skills may need more evidence. In other words, you might need to study and practice the face more in order to get a recognizable likeness. Again, you know, you could find that some people will see the likeness, you know. You have to do this to please yourself. So this is really, that's a selfish act. You're drawing to please yourself. Well, I think we're pretty much, I can't think of anything else I'd want to say in this face. I find him a fascinating character. And that's the before shot, and that's the after. And this is Frantz Kantor, and this is Stan Lee. Nuff said. So I'll catch you guys on the flip side.